Marcus and Matthew Wellington were not ordinary 28-year-old men. Born into unimaginable wealth, the identical twins had inherited their father's business empire worth billions of dollars. Their mansion sat on 50 acres of perfectly manicured land, complete with indoor pools, tennis courts, and a staff of 30 people. Yet despite all their riches, the brothers shared one peculiar problem that had puzzled everyone for years. They refused to eat anything cooked by their maids. The Wellington mansion had seen 17 different maids come and go in just 2 years. Each woman arrived with hope, armed with impressive cooking credentials and years of experience in wealthy households. Some had worked for movie stars, others for politicians, and a few had even cooked for royalty. But without exception, every single one left in frustration after the twins rejected their meals day after day. Mrs. Henderson, their house manager, was at her wit's end. She had tried everything, hiring celebrity chefs, bringing in cooking specialists from different countries, even flying in a woman who had cooked for the Queen of England. Nothing worked. The twins would take one bite, sometimes not even that, and push their plates away with disgust. "Sir, we really need to find someone," Mrs. Henderson said to Marcus one Tuesday morning as he sat in his study reading financial reports. "The twins haven't had a proper home-cooked meal in weeks. They're living on restaurant food and whatever the other staff can manage to prepare." Marcus looked up from his papers, his sharp green eyes showing irritation. He was the older twin by 12 minutes, though both brothers were equally stubborn and particular about everything in their lives. "Then find someone who can actually cook," he replied coldly. "How hard can it be?" Mrs. Henderson sighed. She had been working for the Wellington family for 15 years, since before the twins' parents died in that tragic car accident. She remembered when Marcus and Matthew were teenagers, how they used to love their mother's simple cooking. But something had changed after their parents' death, and now nothing seemed to satisfy them. The brothers had their reasons, though they never spoke about them to anyone. Food held memories for them. Memories of their mother's gentle hands preparing Sunday breakfast, of their father sneaking extra cookies from the kitchen, of family dinners where they felt truly loved and safe. After losing their parents, every meal prepared by strangers felt empty and wrong. It reminded them of what they had lost, and unconsciously they rejected anything that couldn't match those precious memories. Meanwhile, across town in a small apartment that needed repairs, 23-year-old Elena Rodriguez was counting the coins in her old coffee tin for the 3rd time that week. The total never changed, barely enough to buy groceries for herself and her 7-year-old daughter, Sophia. Elena worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day, but it still wasn't enough to cover their basic needs. Sophia sat at their tiny kitchen table, doing homework by the light of a single lamp, because Elena had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying food that month. The little girl never complained, but Elena could see the worry in her daughter's eyes when their stomach growled during dinner. "Mama, Mrs. Garcia next door said rich people need maids," Sophia said without looking up from her math problems. "Maybe you could try that instead of cleaning those big buildings at night." Elena smiled sadly at her daughter's innocent suggestion. "Rich people want maids with experience, mija. They want references and special training. I just know how to clean and cook simple food." But Sophia's words planted a seed in Elena's mind. She did know how to cook. Her grandmother had taught her traditional recipes passed down through generations. Her neighbors always complimented her cooking when she brought food to community gatherings. Maybe it was worth a try. The next morning, Elena walked to the wealthy part of town carrying a small notebook where she had written down her few work experiences. She knocked on several doors, but most houses either didn't need help or wanted someone with formal training. Just as she was about to give up, she saw a beautiful mansion with a "Help Wanted" sign by the gate. The Wellington mansion looked like something from a fairy tale. Elena stood outside the tall iron gates, feeling intimidated by the sheer size of the property. She almost turned around, thinking she didn't belong in such a place, but then she remembered Sophia's hopeful face and found the courage to press the intercom button. Mrs. Henderson answered the gate herself, surprised to see a young woman with kind eyes and clothes that had been washed many times but were still clean and neat. Elena explained that she was looking for work as a maid, and Mrs. Henderson's expression immediately became skeptical. "Do you have experience cooking for wealthy families?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "No, ma'am," Elena replied honestly. "But I know how to cook with love. My grandmother taught me that food tastes better when you care about the people eating it." Mrs. Henderson almost laughed at the simple answer, but something about Elena's sincere manner stopped her. The woman seemed different from the professional maids they usually hired. There was warmth in her voice and genuine kindness in her eyes. "I should tell you," Mrs. Henderson said, "the position involves cooking for two very particular gentlemen. Many experienced cooks have tried and failed. The pay is good, but the job is challenging." Elena's heart jumped at the mention of good pay. "I'm not afraid of challenges, ma'am. I just need a chance to show what I can do." Against her better judgment, Mrs. Henderson found herself opening the gate. Maybe desperation was making her consider this unlikely candidate, or maybe it was the quiet confidence in Elena's voice. Either way, she decided to give this young woman a chance. As Elena walked up the long driveway toward the mansion, she had no idea that her simple approach to cooking, based on love, tradition, and genuine care, was exactly what the Wellington twins needed. She didn't know about their tragic past or their mysterious food rejection. She only knew that she had a daughter depending on her, and she was determined to succeed where 17 other maids had failed. The stage was set for an encounter that would change 3 lives forever. Elena's first day at the Wellington mansion began before sunrise. Mrs. Henderson had given her a small room in the staff quarters and explained the daily routine. The twins expected breakfast at exactly 8 o'clock, lunch at 1, and dinner at 7. They were extremely punctual and hated waiting for their food. "Whatever you do," Mrs. Henderson warned as they walked through the enormous kitchen, "don't take it personally when they reject your cooking. It's nothing against you. They've done this to everyone." The kitchen was bigger than Elena's entire apartment. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under bright lights, and there were more pots, pans, and cooking tools than she had ever seen in one place. Elena felt overwhelmed but tried not to show it. She had cooked for her family and neighbors in a tiny kitchen with basic equipment. Surely she could manage in this palace of cooking tools. For her first breakfast, Elena decided to keep things simple. She made scrambled eggs with fresh herbs, toast with real butter, and freshly squeezed orange juice. Nothing fancy, just good, honest food prepared with care. As she cooked, she thought about Sophia getting ready for school and whispered a little prayer that this job would work out. At exactly 8 o'clock, Mrs. Henderson carried the breakfast tray to the dining room where the twins were already seated. Elena watched nervously from the kitchen doorway, her heart pounding as she waited for their reaction. Marcus picked up his fork and took a small bite of the eggs. His face showed no expression as he chewed slowly. Matthew did the same, his identical green eyes giving nothing away. Elena held her breath, expecting them to push their plates away like they had with every other maid's cooking. But something different happened. Marcus took another bite, then another. Matthew continued eating too, though both brothers remained completely silent. Within 10 minutes, both plates were empty. Mrs. Henderson returned to the kitchen with the empty tray, her eyes wide with surprise. "They ate it," she whispered. "They actually ate everything." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she tried not to get too excited. Maybe they were just being polite on her first day. The real test would come with the next meal. For lunch, Elena prepared chicken soup with vegetables and homemade bread. She used her grandmother's recipe, the same one she made when Sophia was sick. The soup simmered slowly, filling the kitchen with a warm, comforting aroma that reminded Elena of her childhood. When lunch was served, the twins ate in their usual silence. But once again, their plates came back empty. Mrs. Henderson couldn't hide her amazement. "In 2 years, I've never seen them finish 2 complete meals in one day," she told Elena. "What are you doing differently?" Elena thought about the question while she prepared dinner. She wasn't doing anything special, just cooking the way her grandmother had taught her. She used fresh ingredients, took her time, and put love into every dish. Maybe that was the difference. The twins, meanwhile, were equally puzzled by their own behavior. Marcus sat in his office that afternoon, unable to concentrate on his work. The taste of the morning's eggs kept coming back to him. They had reminded him of something, though he couldn't quite place what it was. Matthew was having similar thoughts as he reviewed investment reports in the library. The chicken soup had tasted like comfort, like safety, like something from a distant memory that he couldn't quite reach. For the first time in years, food had actually satisfied him instead of just filling the empty space in his stomach. That evening, Elena prepared her grandmother's recipe for beef stew with potatoes and carrots. She let it cook slowly while she cleaned the kitchen, stirring occasionally and tasting to make sure the seasoning was perfect. As the sun set outside the mansion's tall windows, the kitchen filled with the rich, hearty smell of home cooking. When dinner was served, something unprecedented happened. Marcus actually complimented the food. "This is adequate," he said to Mrs. Henderson, which from Marcus Wellington was practically a standing ovation. Matthew nodded in agreement, focusing intently on his meal as if he was trying to solve a puzzle with each bite. That night, after Elena had finished cleaning the kitchen and retired to her small room, she called Sophia from the old phone Mrs. Henderson had said she could use. "Mama, did the rich men like your food?" Sophia asked excitedly. "I think so, mija," Elena replied, smiling for the first time in weeks. "They ate everything I made." "I knew they would. Your cooking is the best in the world." Elena's heart swelled with love for her daughter and hope for their future. The job paid 3 times what her other jobs combined had earned, and Mrs. Henderson had mentioned that if things worked out, there might be opportunities for advancement. But Elena had no idea that her cooking was doing more than just satisfying hunger. With each meal, she was unknowingly healing something broken inside the Wellington twins, something that had been damaged the day they lost their parents and had never been repaired. The brothers had spent years rejecting food because it reminded them of their loss. Professional chefs prepared elaborate dishes that tasted expensive but felt empty. Fancy restaurant meals satisfied their hunger but left their hearts cold. They had unconsciously been searching for something that no amount of money could buy. The feeling of being cared for, of being fed by someone who wanted to nourish them, not impress them. Elena's cooking carried that elusive ingredient that had been missing from their lives. When she prepared meals, she thought about providing comfort and satisfaction. She seasoned her food with the same love she put into cooking for Sophia. She took pride in creating something that would make people feel good, not just taste good. As the brothers lay in their separate bedrooms that night, both experienced something they hadn't felt in years. The satisfaction that comes from a day of good meals. Their stomachs were content. But more importantly, something deeper had been fed. They didn't understand it yet. But for the first time since their parents' death, food had brought them comfort instead of painful memories. Elena had passed the first day, but the real test was yet to come. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and the twins' mysterious relationship with food was far from resolved. 1 week into Elena's employment, the impossible happened. Marcus Wellington walked into the kitchen. In the 15 years Mrs. Henderson had worked at the mansion, neither twin had ever entered the kitchen. They conducted their business from their offices, took their meals in the dining room, and lived their lives in the upper floors of the house. The kitchen was servants' territory, completely separate from their world. Elena was preparing lunch, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for a salad, when she looked up to find a tall man in an expensive suit standing in the doorway. His green eyes studied her with intense curiosity, and she immediately knew this had to be one of the Wellington twins. "Sir," Elena quickly wiped her hands on her apron. "Is something wrong? Do you need something?" Marcus had been drawn to the kitchen by an aroma he couldn't identify, something that smelled like comfort and warmth. Now, seeing the young woman who had been feeding him meals that actually satisfied him, he felt uncertain about why he had come. "What are you making?" he asked, his voice colder than he intended. "Grilled chicken with lemon and herbs," Elena replied, simply. "And a salad with vegetables from the garden. Mrs. Henderson said you have a vegetable garden behind the house." Marcus nodded, though he hadn't been to that garden since he was a teenager. His mother had loved working in the soil, growing tomatoes and herbs that she would use in their family meals. After she died, he had ordered the gardeners to maintain it, but he never looked at it anymore. "You use the herbs from there?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Fresh herbs make everything taste better. My grandmother always said that food grown with love tastes better than anything you can buy in a store." Something about her words stirred an old memory in Marcus, his mother saying something similar as she picked basil from that same garden. He shook his head, pushing the memory away. "Carry on," he said curtly, and left the kitchen. But the next day he was back. This time, Matthew was with him. Elena was making bread from scratch, kneading the dough with strong, practiced hands. The twins stood in the doorway, watching her work with fascination. They had never seen bread being made. Every baker they had hired used machines for mixing and kneading. "Why do you do it by hand?" Matthew asked. His voice was gentler than his brother's, though still formal. Elena looked up, her hands covered in flour. "Because you can feel when the dough is ready. Machines don't know how to love the bread into existence." The twins exchanged glances. Love the bread into existence? What kind of philosophy was that? "Our previous cooks used professional equipment for everything," Marcus said. "Professional equipment makes professional food," Elena replied, continuing. "To knead. But sometimes people need home food, not professional food." Over the following days, the twins found themselves drawn to the kitchen more and more often. They told themselves they were simply curious about Elena's unusual methods. But the truth was more complicated. The kitchen had become a place of warmth and life that their mansion had been missing for years. Elena treated their visits naturally, continuing her work while answering their questions. She talked about her cooking techniques, her family recipes, and her philosophy that food should nourish the soul as well as the body. She never asked them personal questions or tried to engage them in small talk, which made them feel comfortable, enough to keep coming back. The real breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Elena was making chicken soup, not because anyone was sick, but because the gloomy weather seemed to call for something warm and comforting. As she stirred the pot, she started telling a story about her grandmother. "My abuela used to say that soup was medicine for everything," Elena said, not looking up from her cooking. "Sad heart, tired body, worried mind, soup could fix it all. She made this recipe during the hardest times in our family, and somehow, after eating it, everything felt possible again." Marcus and Matthew stood silently, listening. They had never heard anyone talk about food as medicine for the heart. "When my husband died and left me alone with Sophia," Elena continued, "I made this soup every week. It reminded me that I could still take care of my daughter, that I could still create something good even when everything felt broken." The kitchen fell quiet, except for the sound of soup bubbling gently on the stove. Both twins stared at Elena, seeing her not as a servant but as a person with her own struggles and losses. "Your husband died?" Matthew asked softly. Elena nodded, still stirring. "Car accident, 3 years ago. Sophia was only 4. For a long time, I forgot how to cook anything except this soup. It was the only thing that tasted right when everything else in life tasted bitter. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He and Matthew had been 17 when their parents died in a car accident. They understood the bitter taste Elena was talking about. But eventually, Elena continued, I remembered that food could be happy again, that meals could be celebrations instead of just survival. Now when I cook, I try to put both into everything, the comfort for hard times and the joy for good times. That evening, when Elena served the chicken soup, something extraordinary happened. As Marcus took his first spoonful, tears began running down his face. He couldn't stop them, couldn't explain them, couldn't understand why this simple soup was making him cry for the first time since his parents' funeral. Matthew reached across the table and touched his brother's hand, the first physical comfort they had shared in years. Elena, watching from the kitchen doorway, understood immediately what was happening. These weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of recognition. The twins had finally tasted what they had been searching for without knowing it. Food prepared with understanding, with knowledge of loss and healing, with the kind of love that doesn't try to replace what was lost but honors it while still offering hope. She quietly retreated to the kitchen, leaving the brothers alone with their memories and their meal. Sometimes the most important work happened not in the cooking, but in the eating, when food became a bridge between the past and the present, between loss and healing. That night, Marcus and Matthew talked for hours, really talked, for the first time since they were teenagers. They talked about their parents, their loneliness, their fear of caring about anything too much because they might lose it again. They talked about why they had rejected everyone else's cooking and why Elena's felt different. They were beginning to understand that Elena hadn't just fed their bodies, she had fed the hungry, broken places in their hearts. 3 weeks after the soup incident, Elena's world suddenly crumbled. She received a phone call that every parent dreads. Sophia had been rushed to the hospital with a high fever and severe stomach pains. The doctors suspected appendicitis and needed to operate immediately. Elena ran to Mrs. Henderson's office, tears streaming down her face. Please, I need to go to my daughter. She's in the hospital and they think she needs surgery. Mrs. Henderson's heart went out to the young woman. She had grown fond of Elena, not just because she was the first maid who could satisfy the twins' impossible standards, but because she was genuinely kind and hard-working. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. We'll manage somehow. But Elena's face crumpled with a new worry. The surgery. The hospital bills. I don't have insurance that covers everything. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it all. Mrs. Henderson felt helpless. She wanted to help, but she didn't have that kind of money herself. Before she could think of what to say, Marcus appeared in the doorway. He had been walking past when he heard Elena's distressed voice. What's wrong? He asked, his usual cold demeanor replaced by genuine concern. Through her tears, Elena explained about Sophia's emergency surgery and the crushing financial burden it would create. Marcus listened silently, his jaw tightening with each detail. Go to your daughter, he said firmly. Don't worry about anything else. Elena grabbed her coat and purse, pausing only to look back at Marcus. Thank you for understanding, sir. I'll try to come back as soon as I can, but I don't know when that will be. After Elena left, Marcus found himself pacing his office, unable to concentrate on work. The thought of Elena facing such a crisis alone bothered him more than he cared to admit. He had grown accustomed to her presence in the house, to the way she made their meals feel like more than just food. But more than that, he had begun to respect her as a person, her strength, her dedication to her daughter, her ability to find joy and purpose even in difficult circumstances. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Elena sat beside Sophia's bed, holding her daughter's small hand. The surgery had gone well, but the recovery would take time. Sophia was pale and scared, asking when they could go home. "Soon, mija," Elena whispered, though she had no idea how they would manage the medical bills. The estimate the hospital had given her was more money than she could earn in 2 years. The next morning, a hospital administrator entered Sophia's room with a confused expression. "Ms. Rodriguez? There seems to be some mistake with your account. Someone has paid your entire bill, including all future treatment costs." Elena stared at the woman in shock. "That's impossible? Who would do that?" "The payment came from Wellington Industries," the administrator replied, reading from her clipboard. "Mr. Marcus Wellington himself authorized it." Elena's eyes filled, with tears of disbelief and gratitude. Marcus had paid for everything, not just the immediate surgery, but all of Sophia's follow-up care, medications, and recovery needs. It was an act of generosity that went far beyond what any employer would do for a servant. When Sophia was strong enough to understand what had happened, she looked at her mother with wide eyes. "The rich man paid for my surgery? Why would he do that?" Elena struggled to find words. She barely knew Marcus Wellington personally, yet he had shown her family a kindness that would change their lives forever. "I think," she said slowly, "he has a good heart, even if he doesn't show it very often." Back at the mansion, Matthew noticed his brother's distraction. Marcus kept looking toward the kitchen, as if expecting Elena to appear. Their meals, prepared by a temporary cook Mrs. Henderson had hired, were technically well made but felt empty and unsatisfying. "You miss her cooking," Matthew observed during dinner. "It's adequate," Marcus replied, using his standard phrase. But his heart wasn't in it. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Marcus set down his fork and looked at his brother. "She works hard. She has integrity. When her child needed help, she was willing to sacrifice her job to be there. That kind of loyalty is rare." Matthew smiled slightly. It was the most emotion he had heard in Marcus's voice in years. "Maybe you should tell her that. She's an employee. She's a person, Marcus. A person who cares about what she does and who she does it for. When was the last time anyone cared about us as people, not just as sources of money?" Marcus couldn't answer that question because he knew Matthew was right. Elena had never asked them for anything, never tried to impress them or manipulate them. She simply did her job with dedication and treated them with genuine warmth, even when they remained cold and distant. After a week of Elena's absence, Marcus found himself at the hospital. He told himself he was simply checking on an employee's welfare, but the truth was more complex. He had been worried about Sophia, a little girl he had never met, but who was clearly the center of Elena's world. He found Elena in the children's ward, reading to Sophia from a worn storybook. Both mother and daughter looked up in surprise when he appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Wellington!" Elena stood quickly, smoothing her simple dress. "I'm so sorry I haven't been back to work. Sophia is getting better, but she still needs—" "How is she?" Marcus interrupted, looking at the small girl in the hospital bed. Sophia studied him with curious dark eyes. "Are you the man who paid for my surgery?" she asked with the directness of a 7-year-old. Marcus felt uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "Yes." "Thank you," Sophia said simply. "Mama was crying because she was scared about the money. Now she—" Smiles again. Marcus glanced at Elena, who was indeed smiling despite the worry lines around her eyes. "When will she be able to go home?" "Tomorrow, if all goes well," Elena replied. "But sir, about the money you paid, I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how I could ever repay—" "You don't need to repay anything," Marcus said quickly. "Just come back to work when you're ready. The house isn't the same without you." It was the closest thing to a personal admission he had ever made to an employee. Elena's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and something else, a recognition that Marcus Wellington was not the cold, heartless man he pretended to be. As Marcus left the hospital, he realized something had fundamentally changed in his relationship. with Elena. She was no longer just the maid who could cook food he would actually eat. She had become someone he cared about, someone whose happiness and well-being mattered to him in a way he didn't fully understand. The wealthy, powerful Marcus Wellington was discovering what his money couldn't buy. The feeling of making a real difference in someone's life, not through charity or business deals, but through simple human kindness. Elena returned to work 2 days later, bringing Sophia with her since the little girl needed supervision during her recovery. Mrs. Henderson had given permission, understanding that Elena had no other childcare options. Sophia sat quietly in the kitchen corner, coloring in books while her mother cooked. The twins' reaction to Sophia's presence surprised everyone, especially themselves. When Marcus encountered the little girl in the hallway, instead of being annoyed by the intrusion, he found himself crouching down to her level. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentler than anyone had ever heard it. "Much better, thank you," Sophia replied politely. "Mama says you saved my life by paying for the surgery." Marcus felt uncomfortable with such direct gratitude. "The doctors saved your life. I just helped with the bills." "That's what heroes do," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "They help when people need it most." No one had ever called Marcus Wellington a hero. He was used to being called successful, powerful, wealthy, even intimidating, but never a hero. The word stayed with him for the rest of the day. Matthew had a similar encounter when he found Sophia reading in the library. She was carefully sounding out words from a children's book, her finger following each line. "You like to read?" he asked, sitting in a nearby chair. "Yes, sir. Mama says reading is the best way to visit places you've never been and meet people you've never met." Matthew smiled, a real smile, not the polite expression he usually wore for business. "Your mother is very wise." "She's the smartest person in the world," Sophia said confidently. "She can make anything taste delicious, and she always knows how to make me feel better when I'm sad or scared." As the days passed, Sophia's innocent presence began changing the atmosphere of the entire mansion. Her laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for years. She asked curious questions about everything: the paintings on the walls, the books in the library, why the house was so big for just 2 people. The twins found themselves looking forward to these conversations. Sophia had no idea they were billionaires, or that she should be intimidated by their wealth and power. To her, they were simply Marcus and Matthew, 2 nice men who lived in a very big house and seemed lonely sometimes. Elena watched these interactions with growing amazement. She saw how her daughter's natural warmth was melting the ice that had surrounded the Wellington twins for so many years. But she also saw something else. Both men were genuinely kind to Sophia, patient with her questions, and protective of her well-being. One evening, as Elena prepared dinner, she realized that Marcus and Matthew had both found reasons to spend time in the kitchen area. Marcus was supposedly checking on the new appliances Mrs. Henderson had ordered, while Matthew claimed to be reviewing the household expense reports. But really, they were both drawn to the warm, family-like atmosphere that Elena and Sophia created. "Mr. Marcus," Sophia called from her corner where she was drawing. "Could you help me with something?" Marcus looked up from the appliance manual he wasn't really reading. "What do you need?" "I'm drawing a picture of my family, but I don't know how to draw a hero. How do you draw someone who saved your life?" Elena paused in her cooking, her heart clenching at her daughter's words. Marcus stood frozen, completely unprepared for such a question. I don't think I'm the right person to ask," he said quietly. "But you are a hero," Sophia insisted. "You helped us when we needed help. That's what heroes do." Elena turned from the stove to look at Marcus, seeing vulnerability in his expression that she had never witnessed before. This powerful man, who commanded respect and fear in the business world, was being undone by a 7-year-old's simple honesty. Maybe, Elena said gently. Heroes look like regular people. Maybe they're just drawn with extra kindness in their eyes. Sophia nodded seriously and returned to her drawing. But Marcus remained standing still, profoundly moved by the exchange. That weekend, something unprecedented happened. Marcus asked Elena if she and Sophia would like to join him and Matthew for dinner in the main dining room instead of eating in the kitchen after serving the brothers their meal. Elena hesitated. "Sir, that wouldn't be appropriate. We're staff." "Your people," Marcus replied, echoing his brother's earlier words. "And Sophia is our guest. Guests shouldn't eat alone in the kitchen." The dinner was awkward at first. Elena and Sophia had never eaten in the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and expensive china. But gradually, conversation began flowing. Sophia told stories about school, Elena shared memories of her grandmother's cooking, and slowly, the twins began opening up about their own childhood memories. "Our mother used to make Sunday pancakes," Matthew said, surprising everyone, including his brother. "She would let us help measure ingredients, even though we always made a mess." "What happened to your mama and papa?" Sophia asked with innocent directness that made the adults freeze. Elena started to tell her daughter that it wasn't polite to ask such questions, but Marcus held up his hand. "They died in an accident when we were 17, he said simply. "We've been alone since then." Sophia considered this seriously. "That must have made you very sad." "Yes," Marcus replied. "It did. But now you're not alone anymore," Sophia said, with 7-year-old logic. "You have each other, and you have us." Elena's eyes filled with tears at her daughter's innocent wisdom. The little girl had identified something the adults had been dancing around. They had become more than employer and employee. They had become something like a family. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Sophia's chatter was entertaining rather than annoying, and Elena's presence brought a warmth to the formal dining room that it had never possessed before. When bedtime came, Sophia hugged both twins goodnight, a natural gesture that shocked them both. No one had hugged Marcus Wellington in over a decade. "Thank you for dinner," Sophia whispered to Marcus. "It felt like having uncles." After Elena took Sophia upstairs to their small room, the twins sat in comfortable silence, processing the evening's events. "She called us uncles," Matthew said quietly. "I heard," Marcus replied, but his voice held wonder rather than displeasure. They were both beginning to understand that Elena and Sophia had given them something more valuable than all their wealth. They had given them a chance to be part of a family again. 6 months later, the Wellington mansion had transformed into something none of its inhabitants would have recognized from the early days. Laughter frequently echoed through the halls, the kitchen had become the heart of the home, and Sunday, dinners in the main dining room had become a cherished tradition. Sophia had fully recovered from her surgery and had enrolled in a private school that Marcus quietly arranged and paid for. She spent afternoons at the mansion doing homework at the kitchen table while Elena cooked, often with Marcus or Matthew helping her with difficult math problems or reading assignments. The twins had discovered they enjoyed teaching, and Sophia was an eager student who asked endless questions about everything from business to science to history. Elena's role in the household had evolved far beyond that of a simple maid. Mrs. Henderson had officially promoted her to head of household staff, with a salary that allowed her to save money for Sophia's future education. But more importantly, she had become the emotional center of the Wellington family, because that's what they had become, even if no one had officially acknowledged it yet. The change was most visible in the twins themselves. Marcus smiled more often and had started taking walks in the garden where his mother used to grow herbs. He found peace in tending the plants and often brought fresh ingredients to Elena for her cooking. Matthew had begun playing piano again. something he hadn't done since his parents' death. Sophia loved listening to him play, and her requests for different songs had helped him remember the joy music could bring. But the most significant change came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. In late autumn, Elena was preparing dinner when Sophia approached her with unusual seriousness. "Mama, can I ask you something important?" Elena set down her wooden spoon and gave her daughter full attention. "Of course, mija. What's on your mind?" "Do you think Mr. Marcus and Mr. Matthew are lonely?" Sophia asked. "I mean, I know they have each other, but do you think they're lonely for a family?" Elena's heart skipped a beat. She had been wondering the same thing for weeks as she watched the brothers' obvious attachment to Sophia and their growing comfort with family-like interactions. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because yesterday Mr. Marcus helped me with my math homework, and when I called him Uncle Marcus by mistake, he got this really happy look on his face, but then he got sad too, like he wanted something he didn't. Think he could have?" Elena knelt down to Sophia's level, amazed by her daughter's perceptive nature. "What do you think we should do about that?" "I think we should be their family," Sophia said simply. "I mean, we already kind of are, aren't we? We eat dinner together, they help me with school, they take care of us, and we take care of them. That's what families do." Before Elena could respond, they heard voices from the hallway. Marcus and Matthew were returning from a business meeting, and their conversation carried into the kitchen. "I've been thinking about what the lawyer said," Matthew was saying, "about our wills and inheritance planning. Who exactly are we planning to leave everything to?" "I don't know," Marcus replied. "We don't have anyone." "We have Elena and Sophia," Matthew said quietly. "They're not family, Matthew. They're what? The people who matter most to us? The people whose happiness we care about more than our own? The people who made this house feel like a home again?" Elena. And Sophia heard footsteps stop outside the kitchen door. The conversation had paused, and Elena suspected both men realized their voices had carried. Sophia, with the fearlessness of childhood, walked to the kitchen door and opened it. "Mr. Marcus, Mr. Matthew, Mama and I were just talking about families. Do you want to talk about families too?" The twins exchanged glances, both looking slightly embarrassed at being overheard, but also relieved that the topic was finally in the open. "What about families, little one?" Marcus asked, crouching down to Sophia's level, a gesture that had become natural over the months. "Well, I was telling Mama that I think we're already a family, even if we don't have the same last name. And maybe if you're lonely for a family, you don't have to be lonely anymore." Matthew looked at Elena over Sophia's head. "What do you think about that, Elena?" Elena felt tears building in her eyes. These months had been the happiest of her life since her husband's death. Sophia was thriving with the stability and opportunities the twins provided, and Elena herself had found not just employment but a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. "I think," Elena said carefully, "that family isn't always about blood or marriage certificates. Sometimes it's about people who choose to love and take care of each other." Marcus stood up slowly, his expression more vulnerable than Elena had ever seen it. "Elena, these past months, you and Sophia have given us something we thought we'd lost forever. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." Elena nodded, her heart pounding. "Are you here because you need the job, or because you want to be here? Because if it's just about the job, I'll make sure you and Sophia are financially secure for life, no matter what. But if there's a chance you might want to stay because you care about us too." Elena's tears finally spilled over. "Marcus, Matthew, you saved my daughter's life and gave us a home when we had nothing. But more than that, you've shown us kindness and patience and love. Sophia is right. We are already a family." Sophia clapped her hands together in delight. "Does this mean I can call you Uncle Marcus and Uncle Matthew for real now?" "If you want to," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. And does this mean we don't have to eat in the kitchen anymore unless we want to? Sophia continued. You never had to eat in the kitchen, Matthew laughed. This is your home too. That evening, over Elena's homemade lasagna, they talked about making their unconventional family official. Marcus and Matthew wanted to legally adopt Sophia and ensure both she and Elena would always be provided for. Elena wanted to make sure her daughter understood how much the twins meant to their little family. You know, Elena said as they finished dinner. When I first came here, I thought I was just looking for a job. I never imagined I was looking for a family. Neither did we, Marcus replied. We spent years rejecting every maid's cooking because we were really rejecting the possibility of caring about anyone again. We were afraid of losing people we loved. But now, Sophia asked. Now we know that loving people is worth the risk, Matthew answered. Because the alternative, being alone, is much worse than being afraid. 6 months later, Sophia Rodriguez Wellington was officially adopted by Marcus and Matthew Wellington. Elena chose to keep her own name, but accepted a permanent place as not just an employee, but as the heart of the Wellington family. The mansion that had once been cold and empty now buzzed with life. Sophia's friends came for playdates. Elena taught cooking classes to anyone interested, and the twins learned to be the uncles they had never thought they could be. Years later, when Sophia graduated from university with honors, she would give a speech about the family that chose each other. She would talk about a poor maid who changed everything simply by cooking with love, and 2 lonely billionaires who learned that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought. They had to be shared. The Wellington Mansion became known throughout the community not for its wealth, but for its warmth. And every Sunday, Elena still cooked family dinner, though now she had help from Marcus and Matthew, who had learned that the secret ingredient in every meal was the love shared by the people eating it together.